Hello everyone, that Manga Kid here to do a wrap-up of the Mangautumn Readathon that ran from September 27th through September 29th. So it was a 3-day from Friday to Sunday readathon hosted by Melissa Wrights and Dynamic Dylan here on YouTube. Both channels will be linked in the description below. I was so happy this readathon was happening. There was a bingo scorecard sheet, which I did fill a few of them in, but I basically during readathons I just read whatever I want because it's the most productive way to get through my TBR list is to not really put limits or expectations on the readathon. I just read. And this is the most successful readathon I have ever participated in. I read 31 volumes of manga over the course of this readathon, and I had such a blast. Every single thing I read I really enjoyed, and I'm going to get right into it because I have 31 volumes to get through. So I started off with volume 8 of... Is this volume 8? Yes, sorry. Volume 8 of Princess Jellyfish. I had been reading this series the week prior, and this was just finishing it up. So this is a 2-in-1 omnibus. Most people at this point know what Princess Jellyfish is about. I finally got around to reading it, even though I've owned it for quite a while, and I was super happy with it. There will definitely be a video coming out soon about my thoughts on the entire series, and then this is volume 9, the final volume, and then the extras in it as well. And then I read volume 1 of Azumanga Daioh. This is the old ADV release. It is released by Yen Press, I believe, in a omnibus book, but it's a 4-panel comic about these high school students and their teachers. It is quite funny. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, and it's a quick read as well. There's not a lot of dialogue. Then I read volume 6 of The Girl from the Other Side. I had just picked it up recently, and this is always a pretty quick one to get through. Really beautiful art, really beautiful story, slow-paced, quiet, almost like Brothers Grimm fairy tale-esque. And this volume had ended on a cliffhanger and had a bit more going on than usual. I think we're reaching a point now where things are about to get quite serious, so good read as usual. Then I read No Noose is Good News. This is one of the Kindaichi case files detective stories, and this is about this teenage detective, Kindaichi, who basically just solves murder mysteries. And they're all standalone. I think there's only one where it's 2 volumes that are like part 1 and 2. I believe there's about 16 or 18 volumes in total released by Tokyo Pop, but you can buy them out of order. There's no reason to... I only own 3 of the different ones. I've read them all at this point, and I really enjoyed them. This one was about a string of suicides at a school, I think. Yes. Quite enjoyable. If you can get your hands on any of these, I highly recommend reading them. And like I said, you don't have to read them in order, so if you find one, just pick it up. Then I read volume 3 of O Maidens in Your Savage Season. I do have a first impressions up of this on my channel. It's either coming out very soon or it just came out, I don't remember. But this is about teenage girls in their literature club reading some classic literature that all includes sexual themes, and so they are starting to explore what sex means, and it's a bunch of embarrassed puberty moments, and I really like this artist, Now Emoto, so I was really excited to get my hands on this one, and right up my alley in terms of like coming of age puberty stories. Then I read the final volume, 18 of Barakemon. This one was really good. Series came to an end. You can definitely expect a series review on this one at some point soon. Really enjoyed it. This is just a slice of life, small town, boy from Tokyo young adult from Tokyo moving to a small town and experiencing what that means and what community really means, and kind of coming out of his shell and pulling his head out of his ass basically, um, because he's kind of a pompous, uh, selfish guy who's learning to get away from that. Um, yeah, and he's a calligraphy artist, so he's kind of hit a rut in his career, and yeah, it's kind of bringing out a new life in him, and it's a really fun story. Then I read volume 7 of Kiss Me at the Stroke of Midnight. This is a fun shoujo title by Kodansha. It's not my favorite, but I really enjoy it. I think the art is really nice. All of the characters are gorgeous, and then it also has the funny, like, I don't think there's any here. Nah, there's none on the back this time, but it has a lot of funny, like, chibi faces and things like that. But this guy is an idol, and he meets this high school girl. So there's a bit of an age gap, not too terrible, but I think he's like 25 and she's 16 or 17. But yeah, it's pretty funny. I really enjoy it. I think the first few volumes were better, but now we're getting into the more serious backstory, tragic, all that kind of stuff that of course happens in a shoujo, to give it some dramatic flair. So I also read volume 8. And the most recent release, volume 9. They're pretty fast to get through. It's a shoujo. Yeah, I'm enjoying it, but it's definitely not my favorite. Then I read the Opera House Murders. This is another Kindaichi case files. I believe this is volume 1 technically, because it had the intro of like who he is and his childhood friend who's always with him. But I mean, I already gathered all that from the other volumes I had read, but I believe this is the first volume. Yeah, they're really good mysteries, honestly. If you like mystery stories, I highly recommend checking it out. Then I read volume 1 of Lupin the Third. I don't know if it's just the release itself or what. I found it very difficult to read, and see. Like, it's quite blurry, and I know this is an older title, and maybe it just wasn't printed very nicely. I'm not sure, but I found it very difficult to understand what was happening, and everything was like really faded. And I don't know anything about Lupin the Third. I know that it's popular. I know that there's a lot of films and anime and everything, and that people like it, but I know it isn't really my thing. I only own the first 3 volumes of it, but I think that the release itself doesn't lend itself to be enjoyed. I think if this was in a nicer release, in a way that I could actually see what was happening and read the text properly, I think I would enjoy it more, but I really didn't understand what was going on. And I don't know if that's just me, or... So I didn't continue. I planned to read all 3, but I only ended up reading that one. Then I read volume 1 of Livingstone, and this is the artist of Dead Man Wonderland, Jinsei Kataoka, and then Tomohiro Maekawa is who did the story. This is a really good manga. It's only 4 volumes long, and I read all 4 of them during this readathon, all in a row in one sitting. You can absolutely expect a series review on this one, coming out sometime soon. I haven't filmed it yet, but I definitely will, because this was really, really good. I really enjoyed it. Then I read Claudine, and this is an old title from, I believe, 1978, I think is what the copyright said in the front, and it's about a trans man, and it is quite tragic. I was expecting it to be even more tragic based on the reviews I had heard of it, but it's an important piece, and I found it very fascinating, to see at this point in time, like, the portrayal of trans people in general, but specifically trans masculine people, because mostly you see trans feminine people in the media, in general. So it's nice to see a story that depicts a transmasculine individual. And it was fascinating to see something that was written so long ago and how media has changed and also kind of stayed the same, unfortunately. But I will probably do a series review on this one as well. I just want to gather my thoughts a bit more, but I did enjoy it, and I think it's important, and I'm glad that we have it here in English, and I'm glad I finally picked it up and read it. Next, I read Eclair Girls Love Anthology to That Resonates in Your Heart. And this is just a Yuri high school anthology by a bunch of different Yuri authors. I really enjoyed it. It was very cute. Um, yeah, I really, really loved this. Some of the stories were better than others, but there were quite a few that, like, just hit me right in the heartstrings. Yeah, it was really cute. And I believe there's another one of these coming out soon, so I'm excited for that. And I'm fairly certain I pre-ordered it. Next, I read volume 4 of Banana Fish, just continuing on in this one. Yeah, I was planning to read more, but I just wasn't in the mood for a more, like, story, plot-heavy kind of thing. Hence, second volume of Hazumanga Daioh. It was getting close to the early hours of the morning by this point, and I was just looking for kind of easier, less intense things to read. So I ended up continuing on with The Wallflower. This is just a ridiculous bunch of pretty boys living in a mansion owned by this woman who has this niece that is obsessed with horror. And the aunt has said if they can turn her niece into a proper woman, that they will live there rent free. And so it's just a ridiculous, almost like a gag comedy thing of ridiculousness of them trying to get her to behave like a regular girl instead of a horror obsessed person. And yeah, so I read a few volumes of that and stopped at volume 11. I think I own like 29 volumes of it, so I'm trying to make my way through it. Next, the final thing I read on Saturday night, or Saturday like at like 2 in the morning, was Super Dimensional Love Gun by Shintaro Kago. Probably not the best thing to read right before you go to sleep because it is absolutely disgusting and disturbing. I'll probably do a series review on this one as well, but basically it's erotic, grotesque manga. I honestly thought I wouldn't be able to read it in one sitting because his other work, Dementia 21, I had to read in installments because it was just a lot of ridiculousness. But this one, I think because it was just short stories that were separate from each other, it was easier to get into each one of them, whereas Dementia 21 was all the same character, experiencing different scenarios. So I needed to take breaks, but this was just very different scenarios, very disturbing, but very entertaining, and I really enjoyed it. But probably not the best thing to read right before I went to bed. I had some pretty disturbing dreams that night. Then I woke up and I began with Welcome to the NHK, Volume 3. This is about a NEET who this high school girl is trying to rehabilitate him into a upstanding member of society, I guess. Yeah, it was pretty good, but I wasn't really in the mood to read it, so I stopped at that one and then went to Inside Mari by Shuzo Oshimi because I love Shuzo Oshimi and I love this title. So I knew that I enjoyed it and I was trying to get back in the mood to read, so I figured I'd pick something I knew I loved. And so I read Volume 1 and Volume 2 because that's all I was able to read. I don't have Volume 3. I would have read more if I had it, but yeah, so I read those two. And then I read Volume 1 of Behind the Scenes by Bisco Hattori. I really enjoyed it. I wasn't really in the mood to read it because Bisco Hattori has a lot of writing in her manga, a lot of dialogue, and I just was starting to get a bit tired. So I read this, and I planned to read the other 2 volumes that I own, but I just didn't get to it. And it's a fun college story, though, that is very art-focused and cool and fun, and I'm thinking I will really, really enjoy it. So I'm glad I started it at least. And then again, I was trying to motivate myself to read a bit more, and I picked up something I knew I loved, which is Al Haru Ride. So I read volume 3, which immediately led me to read volume 4. And if I had volume 5, I would have read it as well, but I don't, unfortunately. I only have volume 6, other than the first 4. So, yeah, I would have read more had I had volume 5, but I didn't. So, this is one of my favorite shoujo, honestly. I don't know what it is about it that I really, really love, but I love Ayo Sakisaka's shoujo. I just really, really, really um, there's something about it that just makes my heart like hurt. I just want to give all of them a hug, and I just want to read about them always. I love these characters, and yeah, so I wish I had volume 5, but I don't. And then I rounded off the entire readathon with the first volume of Honey and Clover. This is a story about college students at an art college, and it's about this boy here is kind of the main character, and then this girl who is 18, but she looks more like she's like 12, uh, starts at this college, and he's, I believe, a second year, and he lives in a dorm with a bunch of older students, and then this girl starts at the college and he falls for her. But this is more of a coming of age, sort of early adulthood exploration into love and career paths and self motivation and what you really really want to do and self discovery. That's what this story is about, is self discovery. I watched the anime years ago and I've wanted to read the manga forever. It's like 10 volumes long. I found this volume used and I don't have any more, unfortunately, at this point, but I love this mangaka Chika Umino. I really really wish that we would get more works by this mangaka in English, because the way that they tell stories is so beautiful, really slow paced, really like you got to take your time with it. It's not action packed, it's not super exciting. It's just the comedy is brilliant, the pacing and the story itself, like it really really makes you think. And as someone who watched the anime as a young teenager and now reading this manga as somebody who is the same age as our main character, I'll be 23 soon. I think the main character is like 22 or something, or some of the characters are 22. He's maybe 20. Uh, but now being the same age as these characters, it gives me a different perspective on the story, and I really can't wait to read more of this once I get my hands on it. Uh, but yeah, so that is everything I read for the Mangautumn Readathon. I had such a fun time. So thank you to Melissa and Dylan for hosting this readathon. Um, yeah, I'm shocked at how much I read, honestly and truly, because I worked. I wasn't home at all on Friday, so I barely got anything read on Friday. I read all day Saturday, and then I read a few things on Sunday because I had to go out again. Um, so yeah, I'm impressed with the amount that I read. I'm shocked at it, and I made a huge dent in my TBR shelf, so pretty happy with that. So yeah, anyway, links in the description to Dylan and Melissa's YouTube channels. And if you've read any of these titles and want to chat about them in the comments, please do. There will be review videos for a lot of the series that I completed during this readathon, for sure. And yeah, thanks for watching.